Bhagavan watched me very closely in the years that I served him in the ashram. One time I went to Mother's temple where many people were talking about worldly matters. Bhagavan called me back saying, "Why should you go to that crowd? Don't go to crowded places. If you move with the crowd, your vasanas will infect you." Bhagavan always encouraged me to live a solitary life and not mix with other people. That was the path he picked for me. Other people got different advice that was equally good for them. But while he actively discouraged me from socializing, he also discouraged me from sitting quietly and meditating during the years that I was working in the ashram. In this period of my life, if Bhagavan saw me sitting with my eyes closed, he would call out to me and give me some work to do. On one of these occasions, he told me, "Don't sit and meditate. It will be enough if you don't forget that you are the self. Keep this in your mind all the time while you are working. This sadhana will be enough for you. The real sadhana is not to forget the self. It is not sitting quietly with one's eyes closed. You are always the self. Just don't forget it." Bhagavan's way does not create a war between the mind and the body. He does not make people sit down and fight the mind with closed eyes. Usually, when you sit in meditation, you are struggling to achieve something, fighting to gain control over the mind. Bhagavan did not advise us to engage in this kind of fight. He told us that there is no need to engage in a war against the mind, because mind does not have any real fundamental existence. This mind, he said, is nothing but a shadow. He advised me to be continuously aware of the self, while I did the ordinary things of everyday life, and in my case this was enough. If you understand the self and be that self, everything will appear to you as your own self. No problems will ever come to you while you have this vision. Because you are all and all is the self, choices about liking or disliking will not arise. If you put on green-tinted glasses, everything you see will appear to be green. If you adopt the vision of the self, everything that is seen will be self and self alone. So these were Bhagavan's teachings for me. If you want to understand the self, no formal sadhana is required. You are always the self. Be aware of the self while you are working. Convince yourself that you are the self and not the body or the mind. And always avoid the thought, "I am not the self." Avoid thoughts that limit you, thoughts that make you believe that you are not the self. I once asked Bhagavan, "You are at the top of the hill. You have reached the summit of spiritual life, whereas I am still at the bottom of the hill. Please help me to reach the summit." Bhagavan answered, "It will be enough if you give up the thought, 'I am at the bottom of the hill.' If you can do this, there will be no difference between us. It is just your thoughts that are convincing you that I am at the top and you are at the bottom. If you can give up this difference, you will be fine. Don't adopt attitudes such as these that automatically assume that you are limited or inferior in any way." On another occasion, I asked Bhagavan, "Nowadays many people are crossing big oceans by plane in very short periods of time. I would like Bhagavan to find us a good device, a jnana airplane that can speedily transport us all to moksha." This time Bhagavan replied, "We are both traveling in a jnana airplane, but you don't understand this." In his answer to me, Bhagavan would never let me fall into the false belief that I was separate or different from him, or that I was a person with a mind and a body who needed to do something to reach some exalted spiritual state. Whenever I asked him questions that were based on assumptions such as these, he would show me the error that was implicit in the question and gently point me back to the truth, the self. He would never allow me to entertain wrong ideas. What other questions did Swamiji ask during his early days at Ramana Ashraman? When I first came to Bhagavan, I used to ask questions about liberation. What is bondage? What is freedom? And so on. Muruganar, who was sitting next to me on one of these occasions, laughed and said, "This boy doesn't even know what liberation is and what bondage is." I think he was amused by the innocence of my inquiries. After I began serving Bhagavan, I listened very attentively to all the philosophical explanations that he gave. I also talked to Chadwick and other devotees about various aspects of Vedanta. I gradually absorbed the teachings until a point came where I could say that I had a good working knowledge of Bhagavan's teachings and the various other systems that were being discussed in his presence. In one of his latest songs, Muruganar wrote about Bhagavan, "You make wise people of those who come to you in an ignorant state. This is the grace of Ramana." I always felt that this was a reference to me. It wasn't easy in the beginning. When I first came to the ashram, I was so forgetful I rarely remembered anything that Bhagavan said. Because I was so forgetful, I used to keep a paper and pencil and write down whatever Bhagavan was saying. I felt that my forgetfulness was a hindrance to absorbing Bhagavan's teachings. So one day I approached him and said, "Bhagavan, my memory is very bad. Could you please bless me with a good one?" Bhagavan looked into my eyes for a few minutes without saying anything. From that day on, my memory became very clear and sharp. And so much so, I gave up carrying my pencil and paper. A woman on a pilgrimage stopped off to visit Annamalai Swami and asked for his blessings and advice. Don't forget yourself wherever you go. If you can manage this, you will not need anything else. A student once came to Bhagavan and told him that he wanted to go for further education. Bhagavan told him, "This education is good for you, study more, but at the same time study the person who is studying. Study yourself." One of the old Siddhas, Tamil poet saints who lived about 1,000 years ago, composed a song. "I yearn for and search for the truth. I ran everywhere looking for it. I wasted my life, my time and energy looking everywhere for this truth. So much time was wasted in this pursuit, I have grown old and am about to die. But finally I have understood that the true light is within myself." You are going to different places on a pilgrimage, but what you are really looking for is you, yourself. You cannot achieve success in this by going on external searches because you, yourself, are the one that is being looked for. Your real nature is peace. Forgetting this, you have lost your peace and you are searching in the outside world where there is no peace to be found. This is the teaching of Bhagavan, my Guru. I am passing it on to you. You must understand who you are and what you are, and then you must remain as that. If you can manage this itself will suffice. Right now you are under the impression that you are your body and your mind, but the truth is you are the self. Let go of the I that you imagine yourself to be and catch hold of the real I, the self. What do you hope to gain from your pilgrimage? From going here and there in an external journey? You are holding on to the idea that you are your body and your mind. Having assumed this, you are now looking for an external God so that you can worship him. Though such worship may be beneficial, it will not take you beyond the realm of the mind. While you hold on to the idea that you are a person inside a body, whatever you see will be a manifestation of your own mind. You cannot transcend the mind by worshiping your own external projections. All these external appearances that you see in front of you are Maya. They have no fundamental abiding reality. To find the self, to find what is true and real, you have to look inside yourself. You have to find the source, the place where all these mental projections arise. You are looking for satisfaction in the outside world because you think that all these objects you see in front of you are real. They are not. The reality is the substratum in which they all appear. This is what you should be seeking instead of looking for external gods in different pilgrimage places. An elephant is made out of wood. If we see it as wood, it is wood. But if we get caught up in the name and the form, we will see only an elephant and forget that its underlying nature is wood. All is your own self. This form is different. That form is different. This is more powerful. This is worse. These are all judgments you make when you see separate objects instead of having the true vision that all is an undifferentiated oneness. There must be different varieties of light bulbs, but the current that activates and sustains them is the same. You must learn to become one with this activating current, the unmanifest self, and not get caught up in all the names and forms that appear in it. Here is another verse from one of the Siddhas. Because of your ego, you are going to the forest to look for spiritual light. You are looking for this darshan of light in Bandrinath and other Himalayan pilgrimage places. These things are the illusion of the mind. They depend on states of the mind and the functioning of the mind. That which you are searching for is within yourself. Bhagavan wrote in Uladu Narpadu, verse 11, knowing all else without knowing oneself. The knower of objects known is nothing but ignorance. How, instead, can it be knowledge? All the information the mind accumulates and all the experiences it collects are ignorance, false knowledge. Real knowledge cannot be found in the mind or in any external location. The mind sees through colored glasses, and what it sees is tinted and tainted by that color. If your mind is in a spoiled and disturbed condition, the entire world will appear to be in a spoiled and disturbed condition. If your mind is crystal clear, everything will appear to you to be clear and peaceful. Your most important objective must be realizing the self. If you have not done this, you will spend your time in ignorance and illusion. You, your mind, this world, they are all Maya. Don't become a slave to this Maya. Instead, realize the self and let Maya become your servant. I have just remembered another verse from the Siddhas. Many people have struggled years together to realize the self. Millions and millions of people have struggled looking for the light outside themselves. If these millions and millions of people have died without understanding the self that is within them, it is because they didn't understand the real path. You must find someone who has followed the right path, someone who has discovered this inner truth for himself, and who stabilized himself there. Such a one will give you good advice. He will not send you out on unproductive adventures in the outside world. Following the advice of someone who has not reached this state is simply a case of the blind leading the blind. Neither knows the right path, and both will eventually fall into a big hole. You can find a fruit that is very bitter and decide to improve its flavor. You could take it to all the holy rivers in the country and wash it in each one. But when you come home, the fruit will not be any less bitter than the day you started. You can carry your mind to every corner of the country, visiting all the famous pilgrimage places on the way, bathing in all the holy rivers, doing pujas at all the sacred shrines. But when you return, your mind will be in the same state as the day you started. Mind is not improved by long journeys to far-flung places. Instead, make it an internal pilgrimage. Take the mind back to its source and plunge it into the peace-giving waters of the self. If you once make this pilgrimage, you will never need to go looking for happiness or peace in any other place. Is it not good to remember God and to repeat His name? The Ribhu Gita advises us to remember at all times, I am the self. All is the self. The entire universe is I. If you can keep this permanently in your mind, millions and millions of punyas will come to you. There were many books that Bhagavan liked. Ribhu Gita was definitely one of the best. He once said that the Ribhu Gita is a book for one's last life. You must have read Hanuman's story in the Ramayana. Hanuman's mind was completely lost in the name of Ram, and because of this, he accumulated great powers. He was able to jump across the ocean because of his full and complete devotion. I advise doing japa to the self, either by repeatedly thinking about it or by repeating affirmations such as, I am the self. This affirmation is the greatest mantra of all. If you can do it continuously without interruption, you will get results very quickly. There is no greater japa, no greater sadhana than this. The one who is seeking is also that which is sought. The seeker and the sought are both self. If you are not able to find this self within yourself, you will not find it anywhere else. Searching on the outside and visiting holy places will not help you. Many people are visiting SWAMI'S, temples, and holy places. Doing these things will not yield any good fruit. For real and lasting results, you have to look inside yourself and discover the self within. You can do that anywhere. Many people say that they have found peace in holy places. If you are attached to places, stay here in Tiruvannamalai for some time. The best place to discover the self is here at Arunachala. The power to know the self is available here. There has been the experience of many sages, including Bhagavan. Arunachala is the self. Ramana is the self. Both are here. Both are inside you. You have an inclination towards holy places, try this one for some time, and don't be so keen to rush off to other places. Keep up the meditation, I am the self, and be completely surrendered to that self that is within you and which has appeared here in the forms of Bhagavan and Arunachala. Forget about the bus for a while. I am now wondering if I should cancel this trip. I am having strong doubts as to whether I should leave or not. You have to make that decision for yourself. I have given you my advice. Now you have to decide for yourself whether you are going to act on it. All I will say is that wherever you go in life, don't forget yourself. If I do go, I will be back in a maximum of 12 days. Turn to the light within all the time. Thank you, Swami. It's your destiny to leave, that's why you have to go. But you are still having some doubts as to whether this has really been decided or not. Don't indulge in them. Do what you have to do, and remember the self at all times. You stumble around in the darkness of your mind, not knowing that you have a torch in your hand. That light is the light of self. Switch it on and leave it on, and you will never stumble again. You are all here because there is a desire in you to realize the self. This desire does not arise randomly or accidentally in some people and not in others. It is there because of the punyas you have accumulated from previous births. Punyas that may have come from meditation, charitable works, and so on. These punyas will manifest as a desire for freedom, a desire to do earnest sadhana, a desire to find a good teacher in whose presence the truth will be taught and revealed. If someone is destined to be a jnani in this life, it means that he has come to this final birth with a mountain of punyas to his credit. These punyas will take him to a real guru, to a real satsang, and in this environment, he will do sadhana and achieve the goal. If one does not have this mountain of punyas from the past, there will be no desire for freedom, no desire to look for a guru who can deliver it. Such a person may meet a guru, and that guru may even give him good advice, but the determined resolve to put that advice into effect will not be there. The fierce determination to succeed, and the discrimination that allows one to ignore worldly entanglements only arise in those who have accumulated these punyas. Other people may hear the words of truth, but although they accept that they are true, the inclination to act on them will not be there. Wet wood does not catch fire easily, but if you dry it for a long time in the sun, it will be much more combustible. Other materials such as camphor, petrol, kerosene, and gunpowder will ignite as soon as they are touched by a flame. Devotees can be classified in the same way. Some ignite as soon as they meet a guru or hear the truth for the first time. Others need a period of drying out before they are ready to catch fire. Those who are damp or wet can dry themselves out by sadhana, by having a strong determination to be aware of the self at all times. Self is readily available all the time, but we cannot be aware of it or even put our attention on the thought of it because our vasanas are continually leading our interest and attention in other directions. That is why it is so important to have the awareness. I am not the mind. I am the self. You have forcibly to drag your wandering attention back to the self each time it shows an interest in going anywhere else. Don't be interested in the words that the mind is serving up for you. It is putting them there to tempt you into a stream of thoughts that will take you away from the self. You have to ignore them all and focus on the light that is shining within you. When I was serving Bhagavan in the 1930s and 40s, I obeyed only him. For me, he was the light, and everything else was the chattering mind trying to lead me astray. I ignored the words and advice of everyone else in the ashram and kept all my attention on Bhagavan and his instructions to me. Even China Swami had to concede finally that I was following the correct course. One day he came up to me and said, "You are not listening to my words or carrying out my instructions. You are paying attention to Bhagavan's orders. This determination could only be a result of all the punyas you have accumulated in many previous lives. If there is no external light, such as Bhagavan, to guide you, you have to look within to find the self. You will not benefit from looking anywhere else, from doing anything else, or from listening to any other voice. Walking round and round a temple, doing rituals to a deity, activities like these will not bring you any nearer to the self. The pujas, the japas, the rituals, these are just for beginners. Meditation is the syllabus in a higher class. We need not waste our time by indulging in the activities of the infant class again and again. Here in this class, I ask you to put all your attention, all your interest on realizing the final teaching. I am not the body or the mind. I am the self. All is the self. This is Bhagavan's final teaching. Nothing more needs to be added to it. Keep good company while you pursue this knowledge, and all will be well. I know that listening to the Guru and believing his words is important when he says you are the self, the world is not real, and so on. I can accept what he says is true, but my belief in the truth of those words doesn't seem to make it my experience. You must believe the Guru, and you must also believe your own experience, because the Guru is not telling you to add another belief to your mind. He is instead telling you to look at your own experience of yourself, and in doing so, disregard everything else. There is a story that Ram Tirtha used to tell. A man who was a little mad lived in a small village with his wife. His friends liked to tease him and make fun of him because they all thought he was stupid. One day, one of them said, "We have some bad news for you. Your wife has become a widow." He believed them and started crying out in grief. "My wife has become a widow! My wife has become a widow!" Some of the people he passed on the street laughed at him and said, "Why are you mourning? You are very much alive. How can your wife be a widow if you yourself are alive to complain about it?" "My closest friends have told me this," he replied, "and I trust them. They are very reliable people. If they are saying that my wife has become a widow, it must be true." We would think that a man who believed like this was utterly stupid, because he chose to believe the words of others instead of his own experience. But are we any better? We believe on the basis of indirect information provided by the senses that we are the body. The experience of I am, of the self, is present in all of us. But when the mischievous senses gang up on us and try to make us believe something that is patently untrue, we believe them and ignore our direct experience. Then we grieve about our state, lamenting, "I am bound, I am unenlightened, I am not free." And even when the Guru comes along and says, "You are self, you are free," why do you insist on believing this misinformation that the mischievous senses are giving you? Still you do not believe the truth. You tell him, "The senses have always given me reliable information in the past. I have learned to trust them. What they tell me must be true." And so you go on grieving and complaining even when your direct experience and the words of the Guru agree with each other and reveal the truth. You are saying that I should listen to the Guru because what he says is the truth of who I am? You should trust the Guru because his interest is in showing you the truth. He may occasionally say things that are not true, but he will say them only because he knows his words will push you in the right direction. I once heard a story that illustrates this. A rich man used to meditate once in a while. He had a guru, an enlightened man, who used to tell him, "You are not the mind or the body, you are the self. Always abide as the self." The man would listen attentively, but neither his meditation nor his guru's words had much of an effect on him. One day he approached his teacher and said, "You have been telling me for years that I am not the mind and the body, and that I am the self. I believe it and I meditate on this, but I don't see any changes in myself. This must be a very difficult technique, because I don't seem to be making any progress with it." The Guru said, "Let me look at your palm. I may be able to see something that is more suitable for you." After examining the disciple's palm, the Guru's face dropped. "This is very bad. You should have put in more effort earlier in your life. I can see you only have about 1 week to live. There's not much that can help you now." The disciple was shocked. He went home thinking, "All my wealth and businesses are useless to me now. I put too much time into them and not enough into my spiritual practice. There's nothing I can do now, but I can at least spend my last few days meditating." He went home and told his wife, "My life is coming to an end. My Guru has warned me that this is my final week. I'm going to spend my last days meditating alone. Please tell my friends and relatives that I don't want to be disturbed." After a few days, his guru came to see how he was getting on. "How's the meditation going?" he asked. "Your wife tells me that you have done nothing else for days." "Gurudev, there is no one left to meditate. I have found the peace you have been talking about all these years." The guru knew that this man would never focus full time on realizing the self because he was too caught up with his family and his business affairs. By making him think that his death was imminent, he made him concentrate on what was real and important, and it worked. This is not just a story. It is a tactic that will work for anyone. If you can withdraw energy from your worldly attachments and instead focus full time on the self, you will soon get results. If you are having trouble with your enthusiasm for sadhana, just tell yourself, "I may be dead in 7 days." Let go of all the things that you pretend are important in your daily life and instead focus on the self for 24 hours a day. Do it and see what happens. It's not possible for some of us to make this kind of commitment. We have work to do, responsibilities in the world. Sadhaks should only work enough to maintain the body. Try to avoid unnecessary activities. Less work is good. Devote yourself to your sadhana all the time. You dissipate your desire for the self by undertaking all kinds of useless activities that waste your time and lead to attachments. You think that your life is endless and that you can put off meditation till a later date. With this kind of attitude, you will die filled with regrets, not filled with peace. If you have to engage in activity to support yourself or your family, then do it. But always be aware of the self while you work. While you are doing that work, keep your thoughts 100% on the self. You are what you think you are. You become what you think. If you think of the self all the time, that is what you will become. If you live and die with thoughts of work and family, you will be reborn in a place with more work and more family business to worry about. What do you think of the common belief that a person's final thoughts determine his next birth? A rich man who was very involved in his worldly affairs was dying in his bed. He called to his wife, "Where is my oldest son?" She replied, "He is standing beside you at the head of the bed." The wife was a meditative woman, and she also knew that her husband was about to die. "Don't worry about worldly affairs at this time," she advised. "Relax peacefully into the self. That's the most important thing at this time." The husband had other things on his mind. "Where's my second son?" he asked. "He is also beside the bed. Just try to keep quiet." "Then where's my youngest son?" demanded the man. "I also need to know where he is." "He is here in the room with you. We are all here with you." "So who is looking after shop if everyone is here?" asked the dying man. And a few seconds later he passed away. This is how it is in life. If you spend your life with worldly thoughts, these will be the thoughts that fill your mind at the moment of your death. But if your life is devoted to sadhana, to attaining an inner peace, then at the moment of your death, this will be the state that you die in. Is fasting beneficial? I have heard that thoughts diminish when one restricts one's food. This may happen, but one should be careful not to take it to extreme lengths. Bhagavan said that sattvic food in moderate quantities was the best external aid for sadhaks. Starving oneself will not produce long-term benefits. Bhagavan also advised that we should starve the mind of thoughts rather than starve the body of food. We need to keep the body in good health in order to do good sadhana. Depriving it of food and making it weak is not a step in the right direction. One of Bhagavan's devotees, Lakshman Sharma, was a great advocate of naturopathy and fasting. He was a good devotee who wrote an excellent commentary on Uladu Narpadu. Bhagavan gave him many lessons on this work, and Lakshman Sharma's commentary incorporated the explanations that Bhagavan himself gave. During the 1940s, a boy of about 20 years of age came from London. A bomb blast had affected his hearing. Lakshman Sharma wanted to treat him through naturopathy. Usually this involves going on a fast, although there are several other aspects to the treatment as well. The boy was put on a fast of several days, but unfortunately in this case there was no improvement. The fasting treatment was extended, but the boy became weaker and weaker. Eventually, he became so weak he died. Right till the end, the boy was expecting that this treatment would cure him, but in the end it brought about his death. These treatments have to be taken carefully. There are many people who will not be benefited by them. So should we make sure that we eat regularly? We should not force ourselves to eat if we are not hungry. Eat food when you feel hungry. Food always tastes better if you have an appetite for it. Eating food at times directed by others is far less satisfactory. If we take food at times when we have an appetite for it, we won't get sick. This is not just my advice. Av Vayar, a great Tamil saint, gave this advice in one of her poems, and Tiruval Luvar, another of her great poet saints, wrote, "If you take your food only when you are hungry, you won't get sick. If you live like this, you will never have to go out in search of medicine." I want to ask Swamiji a question. I want to relax more into the present and surrender to Bhagavan's will, but I am not sure that this is really within my power. In Swamiji's book, Talk Number 5, Swamiji gave this answer: according to one's prarabdha, the efforts that are destined to happen will arise in one's mind. This is an extremely significant remark for me. As I understand it, all the activities that happen in this world happen according to Bhagavan's will. But the thoughts that instigate the actions also seem to come from Bhagavan and are also predetermined. Yes, everything comes from Bhagavan. All our activities play themselves out as a manifestation of the divine will. Our karma is part of this destiny. Okay, but I would still like to relax in the present and surrender to Bhagavan's will. I find that throughout the day, thoughts are coming up. A thought comes up, I want to realize the self. I remind myself, here and now, I am the self. This desire does not come from the self, because the self has no need of realizing itself, so this must just be my vasanas coming up. I will ignore this thought. I cannot help this particular sequence of thoughts arising, because Swami has said that these thoughts manifesting in that particular order is Bhagavan's will, my destiny. I might think that I am choosing a particular option or not, but that choice ultimately seems to be incorporated in my destiny. As I watch these thoughts arise, I feel that there is nothing I can do to end them, execute them, or indulge in them. I can surrender and watch them, but it doesn't seem that I can do anything more than that. Your thoughts arise on a moment-to-moment basis because of your vasanas, but it is a mistake to think that you can do nothing about them. You can be interested in them, or you can ignore them. If you show interest in them, they will persist, and you will get caught up in them. If you ignore them and keep your attention on the source, they will not develop, and when they don't develop, they disappear. In Who Am I, Bhagavan compared this process to laying siege to a fort. If you cut off one by one the heads of the thoughts as they come out of the fort of the mind, sooner or later there will be none left. The way to do this is by self-inquiry. As each thought rises, you ask yourself, To whom does this thought appear? If you are vigilant in doing this, the forest of thoughts will lessen and lessen until there are none left. When the thoughts have gone, mind will sink into its source and experience that source. I want to understand this process of ignoring thoughts. Thoughts will arise. I want to realize the self. I have not realized the self, or I must do such and such in practice to realize the self. I realize that these are all desires, all vasanas, so I say to myself, I am the self, here and now I am the self. As Swamiji says, this seems to stop the flow of thoughts for a while. I try to hold on to the I thought as Swamiji recommends, but I don't seem to have any real control over it. I still feel that whether I succeed or not is Bhagavan's will, something that is not within my control. I feel helpless. I remember that whenever the mind moves, it is on a wild goose chase, that it is chasing phantoms that don't exist. So I remember Swamiji's advice and remind myself, I am the self here and now. It helps, but not for long. Thoughts still come up again. Suppose you are walking down a busy road. You encounter all kinds of people doing all kinds of things. Little conversations are going on in one place. Perhaps workmen are digging a hole somewhere. Inside a store, a customer may be arguing about the price of some goods, while in the middle of the road there may be a crowd of people congregating around an accident victim. None of this is your business, but there is always a possibility that you will get interested in some or all of these activities and forget the reason why you are out on the street yourself. Don't get excited by anything you see and hear. Just walk steadily towards your destination. Your vasanas are all the sideshows in your head that can drag your attention away from your main business, which is being aware of the self. If you have no interest in them, you will walk straight to your goal. If something temporarily distracts your attention, bring yourself back by asking yourself, who is interested in all this? Who is getting interested in all this distraction? This will deflate the distracting desire, and it will bring you back to an awareness of your true purpose. Remember, nothing that happens in the mind is you, and none of it is your business. You don't have to worry about the thoughts that rise up inside you. It is enough that you remember that the thoughts are not you. That goes for all kinds of thoughts. Whatever kind of thought arises, have the same reaction. Not me, not my business. It can be a good thought or a bad thought. Treat them all the same. To whom are these thoughts arising? To you. That means you are not the thought. You are the self. Remain as the self, and don't latch on to anything that is not the self. There is another thing that comes up for me. There is a desire for the earnestness to remember the self all the time. The mind will latch on to this and then think, I should meditate more. I should pay more attention to being in the present. Ideas such as these set off whole chains of thought. Yet this still looks to me an effort by the ego to realize the self that is already here. In some ways, it seems to me to be another distraction. If you remain as the self, no vasanas and no karma will touch or affect you. If you remain in the mind, thoughts of one sort or another will bother you all the time. If I understand correctly, my karma is in all the activities that my body has to undertake in this life. I can be a witness to it, but I cannot change it. If I pick up this glass that is in front of me, it happened because it was my karma to pick it up in this moment. I don't have a choice. Either I am destined to pick it up or I am not. Bhagavan said the same thing. When someone picked up a fan and asked if that act was destined from the moment he was born, Bhagavan said, yes, it was destined. If the thoughts I should meditate or I should realize arise. Ask yourself, to whom are these thoughts arising? Why do you need to think about your body and your mind so much? If you are the light, there is no darkness. If you are the self, there is no thought, no body, and no mind to give you any trouble. Any number of thoughts may come, let them, but remember all the time, I am the self. You are not the vasanas, you are not the thoughts, you are the self. Keep that awareness and don't worry too much about what is going on in your mind and what it means. Don't allow any identifications to settle on you. Don't think I am sitting in Bhagavan's shrine. Don't think I am doing, I am acting, I am sitting. You are the self, not the body. Even your vasanas are the self. All is the self. There are no distinctions, no differences in the self. Nothing is separate from the self. You cannot find a single atom, a single thought that is apart from the self. All is the self. But is there anything I can do to discover this? Is not all effort pointless if everything happens to me as predetermined? All these doubts that are troubling you arise simply because you are enmeshed in the I am the body thought and all the confusing sequences that it brings. It is more productive to keep the awareness I am the self than to be the usefulness of effort. Sadhana, effort, and practice, and any ideas you have about them are concepts that can only arise when you believe that you are not the self, and when you believe that you have to do something to reach the self. Even the sequence to whom has this thought come, to me, is based on ignorance of the truth. Why? Because it is verbalizing a state of ignorance. It is perpetuating an erroneous assumption that there is a person who is having troublesome thoughts. You are the self, not some make-believe person who is having thoughts. If you remain in the self, as the self, no harm can come to you. In that state, whatever comes to you will not be a problem. There is no duality when you remain as the self. No thoughts about what you should or should not do, and no thoughts about what can be done or what can't be done. The main thing is not to go out of the self. When you have switched on the light, darkness cannot come, not even if you desire it. Swamiji frequently says that we should meditate constantly to stay in the self. I find that I cannot meditate constantly. When I realize that I am not meditating, the mind tells me that I should do something to get back into the self. This is my real state, my actual condition. I cannot stay constantly in the self. When this thought, I am not meditating or I am not in the self arises, just ignore it and go back to the self. When thoughts such as these arise, look at them and think, not me, not my business, and go back to the self. Don't waste energy on thinking or evaluating how well or how badly you are doing in your meditation. When attentiveness has been lost, when I realize that I am not in the present, that I am not meditating, the mind is inevitably distracted. The thought, the evaluation, always comes. I am distracted. Whatever thoughts come, ignore them. You have to ignore anything that is connected to the body-mind idea. Anything that is based on the notion that you are the mind or the body. If you can do this, the rising thought will not disturb or distract you. In a split second, it will run away. All thoughts are distractions, including the thought, I am meditating. If you are the self, darkness will not overcome you. Whatever thoughts arise in that state won't affect you. Is the ability to remember I am the self part of one's destiny? If you are the self, no destiny will affect you. If you tear your shirt, does that mean that you are also torn? No. Something has happened to something that is not you. Similarly, the body and the mind will experience pleasure, happiness, misery, and so on, all according to the karma that has been brought into this life. But the self has no attachment, no detachment, no happiness, no unhappiness, and no karma. The body is not the self. The mind is not the self. The real I is the self. And nothing ever happens to or affects the self. Thoughts will come as long as the potential for them is inside you. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, they will all keep coming. There is nothing you can do about this flow. But at the same time, this flow of thoughts need not be a problem. Be the self. Be the peace that is your real nature. And it will not matter what comes up. Walk, eat, drink, sleep, meditate, but never think that you are the one who is doing these things. The thought that you are doing something is the thought that is poisoning your life. Because once you think that you are doing something, you will start to think that you need to be doing something else to put yourself in a better situation. You don't have to do anything to experience the nectar of the self. All you need to do is drop the idea that you are doing anything at all. You need to change your vision, your perspective. When you live in the mind and see the world outside you that is separate and apart from you, you will make plans, you will worry, you will have doubts such as the ones you have been telling me about today. These doubts keep coming up in you because you are not dwelling in the source, the substratum. In that place there is oneness, a oneness in which all distinctions, all separation is absent. If you abide as the self, you will see the world as the self. In fact, there will be no world at all. No world, no Maya, no mind, no distinctions of any kind. It is like the state of seeing only wood in the carved elephant, only threads in the dyed cloth. In that state of being and knowing of self, ideas of right and wrong, things to do and things to avoid doing will vanish. You will know that they were just mental concepts. In that state, you will know that mind is the self, bondage is the self, everything is the self. With that vision, nothing will bind you, nothing will cause you misery. The self may appear as the manifest world, as different separate objects, but the underlying reality, the only real substance, is the self, in which they are all appearing and disappearing. Things and people may appear in this substratum, and you may use them or interact with them, but your peace will never be disturbed. When you abide as the self, there is no one left to choose and decide. Life goes on automatically. You will pick up the things that are needed and not pick up the things that are not needed. What you pick up and what you don't pick up will not be a consequence of what you like or dislike. These preferences will not be there anymore. This perspective will be yours when you give up or cease to believe the idea, I am different from the world. Giving up this thought is a great sadhana in itself. Abandoning this false idea will be enough to give you peace. When the thought is there, the world seems to be full of good people and bad people, all busily engaged in doing what appeared to you to be good things and bad things. When the thought is absent, you know them all to be your own self. In that state, you won't like them, dislike them, or judge them, or be aware of them as being other than your own self. This absence of likes, dislikes, and judgments will leave you in your original natural state of peace. Teeth and tongue are both parts of you, and they both function in harmony, without fighting or struggling. When there is the knowledge that mind and self are one, there will be no fights, no struggles, and no attempts to judge or attain. To have this harmony, place the mind in the self and keep it there. This is the real meditation. However, until you reach this state in which there are no distinctions and preferences, you should use a little discrimination with regard to who and what you associate with. Avoid bad company and bad thoughts, and try to keep the conviction that nothing is separate from you. During sleep, you have no likes and dislikes. Jnanis and babies manage this while they are awake. Baby mind is good. Jnani mind is good. I am the body mind is very, very bad. It is a poisonous thought. Yes, I am the body thought is just as poisonous as a cobra. All is the self. All is the nectar of my own self. These are the great affirmations that counter the I am the body thought. Holding on to one of these sayings is the equal of millions of punyas. If we continuously meditate on the truth of these statements, if we hold on to the truth that they are pointing towards, countless punyas will accrue to us. There are many other mantras, but none are as useful as these. Ribhu Gita says, all is one, all is the self. This is the truth that you have to hold on to. To the real I, nothing is foreign in the entire universe. If you know you are everything, there will be no desire to pursue some things and not others. Nothing will be liked more or less than anything else. Do you like or desire your arm more than your foot? When your body is the whole universe, likes and dislikes and desires will be absent. I know that the jnani has no dislikes and preferences, but I have to admit I am different. I have a strong desire to be in your presence. I believe that being here is doing me good, so I stay. Here I have a beautiful feeling that no one has loved me as you have. Drop the body-mind idea, and you will discover that you don't have any likes or dislikes. You do not think that your shirt is yourself. Similarly, the jnani does not believe that he is his body or his mind. The jnani understands that the body and the mind are animated by the self, but he also knows that he shines as this self, whether the body and mind are there or not. Without the self, the body and the mind can do nothing at all. You could not eat, sleep, speak, or do anything at all without the self. Keep your body in good condition if you want to, but don't ever believe that it is you. You can keep your car in good working order without ever believing that you are the car. Have the same attitude towards your body. You are not your car, and you are not your body. Both will perish. But the self will continue because it is always there. When you identify with transient things that pass away or perish, you too will pass away and perish. But when you identify with the self, you will not pass away or change in any way. The self has no birth, no death, no bondage, no misery, no youth, no old age, and no sickness. These are attributes of changing bodies and minds, not of the self. Be the self, and none of these things will ever happen to you.